Okay. So thank you everybody for joining us this evening or this afternoon, depending where you are, for the first of my webinars for the School of Natural Esoterics. And I plan to do a series of these throughout the year, at least one a month. But of course, who is going to be my first guest? It had to be my beloved and dear, dear friend, Pam Montgomery, who is a plant spirit healer, teacher, author of amazing books, and runs the Sweetwater Sanctuary in Vermont, as well as founded the Organization of Nature Evolutionaries. So she is a huge advocate for the green beings, for plants and for the plant spirits, and is a voice for nature. And so I'm so pleased that you're joining me today. Hi, Pam.
Well, thank you, Emma. I always love talking to you. So however I can manage to do it. So if it has to be on a webinar or a summit, okay.
Well, it's better than nothing.
It is better than nothing, right? Someday we'll be together again.
Yes,
Soon,
absolutely.
soon.
And I just wanted to say that these webinars aren't really interviews. I'm not, they're conversations, because, I like to just speak from the heart, see where things flow. We've got subjects, that we're going to talk around. But it's so much nicer, and so when there's an ease of flow to everything. So we're not presenting things, we're having a nice conversation and see where it will go, because Pam and I, as we know, we can talk for days. So the problem is condensing it into a smaller time. So bear with us while we journey through the subject of spiritual development through plant spirit healing. So I wanted to approach this subject because there seems to be misunderstandings in what spiritual development and healing actually is. And so I thought we'd start off with just defining what spiritual development or spiritual practice is from our perspectives. So I'll start off with a little quote about spiritual practice. And this is from David Richo, and he is an author, and from his book, How to Be an Adult in Love. And he says that a spiritual practice is an ongoing dedication to a way of living that reflects a quality that we already have. We practice not to become something, but to manifest our true nature as loving beings. And I just love that, it's just like, we're not trying to be something else. I'm not doing all of this inner work and, and all this kind of like trying to be a good person, to be somebody that I'm not. I'm just trying to remember who I truly am. And I love that idea of and that perspective on spiritual practice.
Yeah, that's a good one. I like that one. Make sure you send that one to me afterwards. That's a good one. Yeah, yeah. And you know what, this comes up so much. And over the year, I've been doing this work now for, oh my goodness, it's going on, oh God, 40 years. I know. Ooh. That kind of ages me a little bit, doesn't it? But what happens in this kind of work is that when you first start working with plant spirit healing and working with plant spirits and all that, it's kind of one of those things where, oh, okay, now I have to go and take this time out of my life, and I have to go and sit with a plant, and I have to be here for this amount of time, and I have to do this, and this to connect. And yeah, you got to start somewhere. But what happens over time, and which has happened for me, which is very much what this quote is about, is that it just becomes a part of who you are. And it's not separate. You don't go, yes, of course you're sitting with plants all the time because it's what you want to do, and you're being invited by them and all that, but it's not like It's not like going to church for an hour on Sunday. It's not like that. It just is a part of your daily walk, and you kind of flow in and out of it, and it's not really separate. So that's what I love about this, is that this whole notion of, you know, spirit being, becoming manifest into form, is, which the plants are really good at helping you to access that and helping you to do that. That's one of the reasons we work with plants, because they're easy access to spirit. And it just becomes, it's not, it's no different than just you, which is what you were saying, Emma. So I love that. And I feel like the plants are really good at bringing us into that.
Yeah, and it's, in the I trained in the Buddhist tradition, and one of the Buddhist traditions, and there's this kind of concept of, there's meditation and there's in between meditation, and it's all the same thing. We shouldn't kind of differentiate between sitting on a cushion to meditate and washing the dishes and it being a meditative process. And it's the same with when you're working with the plants, isn't it? It just becomes who you are. It just becomes a natural expression that I'm kind of constantly speaking to people in my external world, but also beings on my inner world as well. And so there's no differentiation between that once you get used to it, and it becomes a natural process.
Right. And the mundane can also become very profound. It's like you say, like if I put it out there, like I've got something up, or I'm needing some guidance from a plant, or I might have a client that's kind of like, I'm thinking about them, and it's like, okay, what's up with them? That kind of thing. I can be washing dishes. I mean, I can be doing anything. And then on my radar screen, here comes marching across this plant. And I'm like, okay, what are you doing here? Oh, well, I'm going to be really helpful for this client that's got blah, 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 blah. And I'm like, oh, great. Thank you very much. And I'm washing dishes, So it's like the dream time. And, it's just, it's interwoven. It's not separate. So long as you pay attention and you're conscious and you don't disregard it, then there's a lot to gain from being present within the flow of the kind of the back and forth between dimensions. So.
Yeah, and we all work in different ways, don't we? So the plant spirits communicate to us through our different spiritual qualities. Some people, the plants really communicate to me through dreams. And so some people are very dream aware, some people are very kind of like an audio aware, so other people are more clairsentient, and so the plant spirits will work with us in the most kind of easiest way possible for that communication to happen.
Yeah.
So
yeah. So that's a good point that you just made, because the plants want us to succeed. They want us to get it. They want us to come back into the fold, so to speak. There's no like withholding. That's not what they're like. So that's part of the easy access too, is that they really want us to get this. So.
But to become a loving being, to remember our true essential nature is quite a journey. Yes, it's a process of inner transformation and inner illumination. And for me, a spiritual path is about knowing ourselves. And that's why I found that for me personally, working with the plants just took my spiritual practice and integration of my shadow aspects, all of that kind of work, just to another level. So and where in Buddhism I was kind of like studying Buddhism, so it was kind of very kind of conceptual for me. And then when I introduced plants, it was just took it to a whole other level. It's like, oh, now I can start to understand things. I was having direct experience of these concepts. And so another way that we can kind of conceptualize spiritual development, I suppose, is through knowing the mind, knowing consciousness, knowing what our mind does and what it doesn't do, and where the blockages are. And this is why plants are so amazing, aren't they? Because they reflect that consciousness back at us so that we can see where the blind spots are, or what are the not so pretty aspects of ourselves that need looking at. And so, yeah, can you tell us a little bit more about what you think about that?
Well, that's so interesting because I've been working with one of those right now in this last little stretch. I'm in the middle of this, what is called a launch. I'm not going to the moon, but I have an online course coming up. And so this is our launch period when we're like, it's really an intense time period. And there's been a lot going on, not only with the launch, but in general. And some of it has been a little edgy. And so I have found myself catching myself in that negative rap, the monologue that runs sometimes. And I'm in that right now of like, okay, let's see what I want to say about this. About the most predominant energy is what gets responded to. And I don't want my predominant energy to be, it's like, oh, yuck. It's like, that's not helpful to me or anybody else. And that's the energy that's going out. So guess what? That's what comes back. So I was like, all right, Pam, you have to stop this. And I have this little saying to myself, there must be a plant for that. And so,
Always.
there's always a plant for that, for whatever it is, there's always a plant for it, So I'm just like, all right, so what is it? What is the vibration that you do want to, like, what is it that you want to put out? I'm loving kindness. That's what I want to do. Okay. Everybody makes mistakes. Everybody like slips up a little bit, and okay, maybe we forgot to do this with the launch, or maybe blah, 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 whatever it is. And it's like, okay, so, all right. So loving kindness, please. I really want to be in loving kindness. So who am I going to be working with? Well, there's a long list, but I would, go immediately to Rose, maybe Hawthorne, which of course, Hawthorne is the big one this year for me, because that's the one we're doing our initiations this year. Was 2 Hawthorne initiations in person here in Vermont, and then 1 online in the fall. And so it's Hawthorne, Hawthorne, Hawthorne. So it's like, okay, breathing deep and bringing Hawthorne in. And Hawthorne really just puts you right back on the throne, put your heart right back on the throne. It doesn't want, it's not into like, the heart's not designed for street life. And so it puts it back on the throne. And I just have been like, so grateful for Hawthorne right now, because I've been struggling, because I haven't been standing in loving kindness. And it's so that affects how things go, and that affects this launch, and it affects everybody involved with it, and it affects everything. So I'm not sure if that answers the question that you asked, but that's what's up for me right now. It is definitely a shadowy spot that I've been dealing with, is that negative rap that is just not helpful. So
Yeah. Everything's a learning experience. That's what I tell myself.
oh, good. We get to learn again.
Oh,
we get to grow. Yay.
More lessons to learn. And so, the evolution of the soul, that's what we're kind of like, this life we're in, as spiritual beings. Anybody on this webinar, we're interested in developing and evolving our soul. That's what we're here to do. This evolution of consciousness through rebirthing ourselves. It's constant process. And so you and I take people through plant diets, don't we, Pam? I learned from you, and we hold a container for people to take a set amount of time to just immerse themselves in the dream of that plant with an intention. So people bring into that their intention to either heal physically or spiritually or emotionally, when actually it's all one, and so that the healing process for me, that the spiritual development is the healing process. So anything that manifests in the body is like the last point of manifestation, isn't it? From an energetic blockage, from a like trauma, it could be many, many things. And so these plant diets that we take people on, and I put them in the context of the shamanic journey whenever I do a plant diet, because they come in many forms, don't they? It could be an essence protocol, it could just be 3 days of fasting, it could be 4 months of drinking the tea, growing the plant, really getting involved in the medicine making. So for me, it's a shamanic journey for me, working with plants. And so I'm constantly on shamanic journeys, which is great. But it's what they do is that they're bringing stuff up for us to look at, aren't they, in these plant diets? That's what's happening.
Yeah.
So can you tell what's kind of like a nice example of where people have realized that actually illnesses they're dealing with is a spiritual issue?
Okay, so you're asking about, well, somebody who's having physical manifestation. Well, I can tell a story that was part of an initiation, and this was yarrow. It was a few years back, and I can tell this story because I was given permission to tell it by the woman. I won't mention her name, but I think she probably wouldn't even mind that. But and she had her hip was like locked up, like for years. It had just been like locked, and and painful. Not so it was hard. And this is a young woman, who really good herbalist. I mean, she did my plant spirit healing apprenticeship. I mean, she knew about all this stuff, and she had traveled in I believe it was Guatemala somewhere. She'd traveled in Central and South America for quite a bit, and at one point she had a pretty horrible experience where she was raped, and ever since then, that point, this hip was locked up, and she'd had a few miscarriages. So it was all in that second chakra area, basically. First, second chakra area she was just locked. And we did a green breath. A green breath is it's a kind of journey with breathing. It's like transformational breath work, only you're focusing on a plant. So during the initiations, one of the things we do is a green breath with that particular plant. And so during the green breath, she had this transformative experience where she went through the whole experience that she had not been able to do. And she released it with the help of yarrow during green breath. And then afterwards, and she just wept and wept and wept and wept. And we all just held her. I mean, not physically, but we were in circle, and we just sat in witness of her and her healing and her release. Powerful. It was unbelievable. And she said, I was so afraid I didn't even want to ask yarrow. I didn't want to even ask. But this is always kind of like, it's the background noise. It had been the background noise for her life. And she said, I was so afraid I didn't even want to ask. But Yarrow, it's gonna make me cry just talking about it. But Yarrow knew that this was the biggest thing that she needed healing with. And so her hip released during the green breath, and she just cried and cried and cried. And we all sat there and just witnessed her crying. And this went on for 20 minutes of hysterical crying. And we sat quietly and just nobody trying to fix her, because she was good. She and Yarrow were good. And about, I'm going to say, let me think, that was 6 to 9 months later, she became pregnant, had a beautiful child. She's now had baby number 2, and that hip has never bothered her ever again.
Oh,
So that's an example of spontaneous healing that had manifested in a physical nature from an extremely traumatic event was what caused it. And she spontaneously healed with Yarrow.
That's profound. And it's that process of going into the feeling. I think that's what people often ask me, how do I integrate? How do I integrate these traumas? And it's to create a space for yourself where you feel safe enough to go into that trauma and feel it, because it's in the body. And so we have to feel through it and face those feelings so that we can release them. And so people sometimes think, well, if I'm going to make it stronger. I'm not quite sure. Is somebody, everybody make sure they're muted, if that's okay. I thought I'd muted everybody. But yeah, to really kind of to embody the process, because and to bring conscious awareness to something is to illuminate it, and to therefore, what I found is that when you give something, bring conscious awareness to something, it's like it releases the power that it has over us, and so it starts to dissolve. And so going into that, but sometimes you need a group, especially when it's grief. I think you need to be held by a group. You need to be held by, I've done a West African grief ritual, and they say you need to be held by a village, because grief is so deep. It goes so, we don't know how to deal with it in the West. And so it gets really kind of like really embedded deeply into our energetic system, because we're scared of what we're going to see underneath it. So I
think Jim needs to mute.
Jim, is it?
Jim, could you mute? There we go. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, but when it comes to past life traumas, these can be a little bit more difficult to access, can't they?
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
And of course, I've done lots of past life work with you, Pam, and we've worked with cedar, and we've worked with rosemary, haven't we? And again, set within a group setting and a plant initiation and a training, with a big group of people, when you have that kind of like sacred setting within sacred space as well, that really amplifies the spiritual access that we have to the plants. And so with rosemary, I remember I had a past life memory come up with rosemary of Egypt, just from rosemary. I cooked my potatoes with rosemary. Suddenly rosemary's taking me back to Egypt. I'm like, wow, the plants are really surprising. And there was a similar process with cedar. That was more on an ancestral kind of past life thing. But how do you help people integrate past life traumas to help with their kind of spiritual and multidimensional understanding?
Well, it's funny because there's a few different things that happen here, but what I see with people is that I call it a bleed through. It's like they they are doing things in this lifetime that don't, very out of character sometimes, or not, it's not something that you would think of that this person would engage in or something. And when I see that, or they start talking about, like, I don't know why I did that. And so then I start to look to see, oh, this could be from a past life, and it didn't get resolved in the past life. So you have to run it through again in this life, because, as you say, it's all about our evolving and our growth. And if we missed our chance last time around, then we have to do it again. And so, it kind of gets into, the whole ancestor thing, which is blood ancestors. And at the same time, there can be, as you said, crossover between bloodline and then your soul line, which is your incarnations, which sometimes they cross over, and then it gets really, really, really tricky. So anyway,
you mean when you're born as your ancestors, basically, you're born as one of your ancestors?
Yeah, either that, or let me see, how do I want to say this? Say, like, if you need like soul retrieval kind of work done from a past life, but it turns out that in that past life, the soul retrieval was with an ancestor. So it just gets all like, and so anyway, it's not doable. It's just gets a little trickier. That's all. So with ancestors, so for me, I work with right side, left side. And the right side is your soul line, which I would call, your past lives, your the incarnation that your soul travels through from each lifetime to lifetime. And the left side is the ancestral line, which is your blood ancestors, which also go back in other lifetimes. So you've got these two tracks going. And sometimes what I'm saying is sometimes these cross over. And so with the ancestral line, I like cedar. I like to work with cedar. So one of the things that we do is we do an exercise, I guess you could call it a journey. It's kind of a journey. And we actually step backwards into the shoes of our ancestors. So we actually step into the body of our ancestors. And, and most of us, I would say, don't go beyond great grandparents. Beyond that, we don't know who they are. And here in the States, it's a little different for y'all in Europe, but here, most of our ancestors were running hard and heavy from Europe, from whatever it was, some kind of oppression, usually being oppressed. And so it's like I was working with a teacher at one time, and one of our homeworks was to learn our ancestral line and go beyond the first line, like who your first ancestors were. Okay, who were they before that? Where did those ancestors come from? Which, like, it's kind of like, how do you do that? So partly it's you do it in the dream time or in journey work, because you don't know. And during that time period, I knew that one of my cousins had the family Bible on my father's side. And I contacted my aunt and to find out how to get in touch with him to get a hold of this family Bible, because so much stuff is in the family Bibles, who married who and who came over on what boat and blah, blah, blah. And she said, and so the first line for me was Ireland. And she said, "Oh, you're not Irish." And I was like, "Huh, how'd I get that name? My maiden name is McCain." I was like, "Huh, how'd I get that name?" She was denied. I mean, she wouldn't even admit that we were Irish. That's how hard people want to forget where they came from. And I was shocked. I was like, "You're kidding me. Really? You're going to say that?" And so it's just, because there was so much, like I say, for many people in this country, we're just a bunch of orphans here. We don't know where we came from. Okay, Ireland, maybe. Oh, what was before that? Well, maybe Scotland. Oh, what was before that? Oh, I don't know. British Isles. I don't know. Who knows? So it's just this, it's a difficult one because you don't really know where you came from, and you don't have anybody telling you where you came from. And not only not telling you, but wanting to deny it and suppress it and never talk about it. Forget if you have any Native American blood. Oh my gosh, it's changing around that. But anybody who's got a little bit of Native American blood, about 2 generations ago, that you did not talk about that because that was a no-no. So it's like, oh my gosh. So just to unravel it a little bit. So one of the best ways you can do that is to go into these Dreamtime journey experiences where you actually step into the shoes of your ancestors and you allow yourself to get to know. And Cedar, for me anyway, that's who I'm working with in this particular exercise, really helps you to do that. And it's been super helpful for me anyway, and a lot of discovery in doing that. So I don't know, you might have a different take on it, Emma, because because you live in Europe, perhaps it's not quite that intense there of not knowing.
Well,
Not
I
knowing.
trace my ancestors back to 1066. So
That's good. That's pretty good.
came over from France with William the Conqueror. So yeah, there's well, one side of the family did anyway, and then the other side are Irish, so Welsh and Irish. So quite a bit of a mixture. So yeah, it's perhaps a little bit easier over this side of the pond. But still, it has its challenges, and I think the idea of past lives themselves can be a little bit misleading, because when we're dealing with a past life issue, it can be really difficult to get to, but also it's still alive within us. So it's not past; it's very much present. And so I see past rather than past lives. Past lives gives this idea of linear time, doesn't it? Which we know we're trying to get out of linear time and get back into the cycles and the seasons and everything's cyclical. And so I feel that, past lives are more kind of parallel lives, but just kind of on different timelines, kind of reaching out from us. And it's kind of like within a sphere, and perhaps we as the conscious person in 3D manifestation right now are holding that center, perhaps. And then there's all this kind of like these past lives coming out in different directions and influencing each other, because those past lives for me, my ancestral past lives are influencing me for sure. And I know this because when I've asked my ancestors for help, I've got an ancestral altar in my house. When I've asked for help, I've got it, and actually I found that by asking my ancestors to support me, if I've got something I'm going through, like a process I'm going through, like some a grief release, or just something process whatever I'm working on within myself, the ancestors, it's almost like they're nourished by our tears. They want to take them and help us to evolve. And so, there's so much in the ancestral work to unravel. And it's a huge part of spiritual development, I think. And it's one that's quite overlooked, is the importance and the power of our ancestors. So, yeah.
Well, it's also, those burdens that our ancestors carried, and how, because it becomes our burden too. And it's like we're never going to change all the isms if we don't lay those burdens down. And so that's part of it too. It's just like, and I even my parents, I've come up with that recently. I've spent some time in another country that was extremely eye-opening for me to be there, because I was a minority. I was the minority there. And it was really good. It was really good. But man, I heard those voices in my head, and it wasn't mine. It was my father. And I was just like, that ism's gotta go. And being in the milieu that I was in this past winter really, really helped, because here I was, and I'm a minority, and it was good. And I was so happy to have that experience. And, but boy, those isms come right up. And if we don't lay those down, those burdens or prejudices or whatever you want to call them that our ancestors carried, that we now carry. So here's where we're being present with what our ancestors were going through, or whatever their stuff was. And but if we don't lay those isms down, if we don't put them to rest, if we don't, or heal them, ideally that's what we're doing, healing them, then the notion of peace on this planet is never going to happen. We really have to lay down some of those prejudices. So it's good work, it's powerful work, and it's necessary work.
Yeah, I was going to say it, and at least recognize them, even if you think, oh God, that's when you look at something, when I first thought about ancestral work, I was like, oh my God, that's huge. How where do I start? But just by recognizing those kind of things that are still working within us, the things that you can generally feel that, well, I don't know where the start of that issue is within me. And so it's probably past life. Or I find that if somebody or myself is dealing with something that's affecting a large part of the life, it's having a huge effect on our whole life in this incarnation, then it's most likely past life. So getting back to that origin of that trauma, quite tricky, and it takes time. There's many layers to work through, and so really having resilience, spiritual resilience, which is one of the things I want to talk about as well. Having that kind of like that, a spiritual practice, whether it's a meditation practice or literally just doing essence protocols all the time, that's a spiritual practice, I think. So that we can build up this inner truth. For me, spiritual resilience comes from truth and knowing what our truth is, without being told by somebody else what we should be thinking or what we should be doing, etc. It comes from us, a deep knowing within ourselves. But we can only get there if we know ourselves, so it's just a constant process. And I know that when I learned the plant diets and initiations with you many moons ago now, I've just been doing them ever since, because it's a lifetime's work. But what I found is that the more kind of integration we do, the clearer our energy field becomes. And so therefore, the quicker we heal, the clearer the mind becomes, the more energy we've got, because our aura, our energy field, isn't clogged by toxicities, attachments, entities, toxicities we've inherited from other people, we bring them over from past lives. And so working with the plants really helps to clear up all of that clutter. And that's a healing process, part of the healing process, that then helps us to reveal our natural self. So for me, energy field management is a really key way of helping us to evolve spiritually.
Yeah, it was when you said clean up the clutter. There's a lovely woman that I have become friendly with over the last few years. Her name's Myra Jackson. And she talks about the debris field, and how we're just walking through a debris field right now. So there's so much out there, and which becomes in there. And it's a debris field. I mean, so this that you're bringing up, this is like daily maintenance, I would say. I mean, we really, every day, and the plants are super good at clearing your energy body, so your energy body, about as far as you can stretch your arms, generally speaking, that you figure this is your energy body out here. And doing doing plant bathing, plant bundles, smudging. I mean, there's, stones. I mean, there's a few different things, sprays, the essence sprays. I mean, there's a bunch of things you can do to clear your energy field, but the plants and water combo. I love that combo. They just really seems to really clear it out. So we have a particular plant bathing, you might call it, where you have a bundle or a broom, some would call it a broom of plants, and you just gather your plants. I like them to be live. You can do dried ones too. That's a little different process, but you just make prayers as you're picking your bundle, and then you dip it in water, and then you're shaking the water around you and making blessings. It's nice if you do it with another person and you make the blessings and then they do it for you. But I swear that is it's relatively easy. I mean, if you have to be inside and do that, some people don't want everything to get wet. So sprays work well. But my husband coined a word from these plant bathings that we do with plants and water. And he says, "Oh, we're so insparkulated." And that's exactly what it is. It's like your auric field just becomes crystal clear and sparkly. It's just like, and sparklation. So,
and if you don't do that, and it gets, just like we shower most days, we need to cleanse the energy field, because if we don't do that, what that does then is it kind of gives us false thoughts, and so therefore we don't know what our truth is if we've got a toxic energy field. So anything in the energy field will affect the mind, because the mind, the body, the energy field, it's all one. So you've got this, just say you've picked up or you've absorbed somebody's kind of unhelpful emotion that you've been kind of with all day, and then you bring it home, and so you're living that emotion. It can affect you psychologically, emotionally, make you, if it's, you've absorbed somebody's anxiety, for example, then it can make you anxious, and until you cleanse yourself, you're going to be in that false state of anxiety. And so that applies to entities that feed on particular emotions. It applies to other types of toxicities. So if we don't keep our energy field clear and clean regularly, because we live in really toxic environments, because they don't know how to space clear, then we're not going to be able to develop and evolve spiritually, because we're just clogged and weighed down.
Other thing about this is that our energy bodies get full of static when we're in these in the debris field. We're in the debris field. It's just staticky. So it's not. So what that means is you can't hear the message. So you're not, receiving your guidance from your helpers and guides and your plant spirits and all of that. You can't, it's very difficult to hear the message when there's a ton of static. So removing the static. So that's what these plants and water together, anytime you're around running water. So if you're at the ocean or you're, near a stream, running water tends to really help remove the static. But that's one of the big things that I have found, is that so many people, and, well, I'm sorry, but this computer that we're on and the cell phone, it's like, okay, here we go. And all of that, all these EMFs, there's so many electromagnetic fields around us all the time now, and that creates static. So we have to remove the static or we're not going to hear the message.
So grounding, walking barefoot on the ground, sitting in the trees, inviting them, asking the plant spirits to help cleanse us and ground us, the water, Olympia, all of that helps to get rid of that static, and try and use Ethernet rather than Wi-Fi. It's much better.
Right. And direct current, which, most of our houses are alternating current, which the current's going around us like this all the time. So it's circulating around you all the time. Whereas if you had solar panels, it's DC current, it's direct current. So it just comes direct one line direct comes in, and that's where you plug in to get your electric, instead of it circulating around you. So it's a little better. And but yes, there's lots of practices you can do to eliminate the static, but it's every day is, I would say. And, it doesn't have to be like, it can be simple. I have marble stone. I have marble here where I live. This mountain that I live at the base of, it's called Marble Mountain. It's full of marble, and the stream that runs through our property has tons of marble in it. And it's rough marble. It's not polished marble like you would think of marble being. But I have found, and I have this one stone that fits perfectly in my hand, and it's big. It holds in my hand, and then it's got a part that sticks up, and it's marble. And I just go, whoosh, whoosh. It's a great stone for clearing your static out of your energy body. It seems like water stones are good for that. So, but yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So it reminds me of talking about plants to help us in challenging times. It reminds me of the talk you gave at Plant Consciousness years ago. It was plants to keep us sane during insane times.
Yep.
And I loved that talk, but God, that was wow, that was what, a good 5-6 years ago now, but it's so relevant. We're in even crazier times now. Who knew back then that,
Getting more and more insane every minute.
So what plants are you working with at the moment to,
Well, I would say adaptogens. So that's what that talk was a lot about, adaptogenic plants. So, there's a rhodiola is, okay. So what are the ones? Tulsi, sacred basil, big time.
What's her message at the moment?
Oh, well, kind of what we've been talking about, living in your truth, your true essential nature, standing in your true essential nature, and how important that is, even though your truth might not be somebody else's truth, your own sovereignty. We'll go back to that sovereignty piece, Emma, that we just talked about not long ago, which I really attribute my deep understanding of sovereignty came to me from Emma. And she probably doesn't remember that, but I do. And how I'm gonna say probably especially women struggle with being in their own sovereignty. And it's just kind of been probably part of the ancestral thing that has come down the line, is that not being able to stand in your own truth, in your own sovereignty, being your own authority. And there's always somebody kind of over top of you, like telling you what to do or controlling you or whatever. And so yeah, Tulsi, Tulsi was a goddess, is a goddess. And she was one of the 9 sacred herbs that was to be in service to Vishnu. And so, but she's revered in India, which is where she comes from originally, as a goddess. And so sitting outside the doors of many homes is a Tulsi plant. It's actually a bush there. Here it's a little annual plant, but and they light little ghee lamps, and they put it at the base of the Tulsi, and it keeps evil spirits. It keeps the household healthy and free of dis-ease on whatever level that may be. It doesn't have to be just physical, but on any level. And she helps you to walk the path that you came here to walk, your soul's path. She's a lot about soul work, and to walk the path that you came here to walk. And so what I'm seeing now with Tulsi is, it's not just your own individual walk, but what is our path as a species. So it's kind of getting to the species, the human species I'm talking about. Like, what are we doing here, or supposed to be doing here as a species? And so it's kind of like moved to this bigger level. It's like, yes, individually, what path are we here to walk? What are our gifts that we're here to share? And absolutely need to share them now. That's what we're here to do. Absolutely. And standing in your own sovereignty so that you can do that. But then what is that big picture right now, which I think has to do with being good, genuine, authentic stewards on the planet, which that's what part of what is all about this particular species that we happen to be a part of. And so it's kind of like taking it to another level, and partly because the planet, Lady Gaia here, is calling us to take up our rightful place as a part of nature again. Because if we don't, then we're not living according to our group soul as a species.
But on a personal level as well, this idea that we're here to know ourselves. It's a realm of self-mastery, in order to master ourselves, not other people, but ourselves, which is the hardest thing. But this idea of this concept of sovereignty as well really speaks to me of not just external sovereignty, being self-sufficient, kind of like having strong boundaries, but also inner sovereignty. So a lot of people I've seen mistake allies, spirit allies, like for guides, and therefore outsource decision making for themselves to their guides. And so for me, that's outsourcing our sovereignty. That's a lack of sovereignty. So some people kind of rely on their guides a lot to make daily decisions. And so they're outsourcing. So okay, I don't know, should I buy this house? And asking a guide who might never have incarnated into a time-space continuum, so doesn't know what it's like down here, can't understand things from a human perspective. And so the decision should come from our higher self. And so, yes, we have allies to support us and to kind of like to help us, but to actually make decisions for us, outsourcing decision making to anything outside of ourselves. Okay, yeah, get information, gather information, consult, etc. But ultimately, we make the decision, and that should come from our higher self. So this idea of sovereignty really goes down to a deep level of who are we asking on our inner planes? How are we outsourcing our power even to our spirit allies?
Right. That's a great way of putting it, outsourcing. I like that. Yeah, that's good. That's good. It's so true. I'm thinking about somebody right now that's doing exactly that. I was like, oh, that's what she's doing. Yep. So yeah, that's great. That's great.
Yeah, so it's really a case of getting to know who your team are and knowing them at a really deep level, and that takes time and focus, and so other things. So just to wrap things up for the last 5 minutes or so, let's talk about some really kind of fab things that the plants have taught us on our path. So, because plants really helped me to develop my healing skills, to develop my psychic abilities, to develop and understand my mind. That's, for me, that's why I studied Buddhism, because I've just always, since I was a child, I've meditated. I've always been fascinated with the workings of the mind. So I went to study with the people who know it best, the Buddhists, and learned a lot. But then the plants came in and showed me how to hone my skills. So wormwood, when I did lots of dieta with wormwood, she taught me how to be precise in how I work, and to really trust in myself and be really precise in the clearing work that I did. So there's none of this kind of vague, oh, it's just let's bring in some healing. No, like we have to be really precise to find the correct remedy for something. And then the hazel tree really helped me to channel energy, because I work with pranic healing as well to clear the chakra system and the energy field. And so channeling Hazel really helps to kind of unblock and helps us to do that. So what are the kind of like the more spiritual kind of skills that the plants have helped you with?
Oh, well, gosh, you know what, you want me to talk about this in 5 minutes? I need 5 days.
No.
Um, well, you know, my favorite right here from dear friend Jackie. You got one of these too, don't you, Emma? One of these necklaces? Mugwort. This is a little mugwort leaf necklace that one of Emma and mine's friends gave us. And you know, mugwort is one of those, it's like what I've said to all my students, if you only work with one plant in plant spirit healing, let it be mugwort, which of course is a relative to wormwood, who Emma's talking to. They're both artemisias. And so, you know, mugwort is so great because I mean, it does so much, but it really works well with energy, and it really helps, you know, move energy from here to there. It really helps direct the movement of the energy. So it's just a fabulous, fabulous plant. And you know, there's a lot of strange energy out there these days that needs redirecting. And so I love mugwort. So mugwort's one of my favorites. Tulsi's one of my favorites. I mean, again, Tulsi, also known as sacred basil, holy basil. It's all the same plant. I grow tons and tons of it. And it's been a really cool spring here. So I can't, you know, my little plants are like, and so they're like, what? There's no way I can put them out now. So anyway, I'll just hang on to them inside until I can. But I love it because of it's just so incredible on so many levels. So a lot of good soul work. So and I like St. John's wort. That's, to me, that's like really which is happening a lot for a lot of folks right now, is when you just go into that deep depression, that place where it's like, what's the point? Sometimes you're like, what's the point anymore? And everything, it's so overwhelming. I mean, you don't even read the news anymore. Oh gosh, it's just, and you just get into that space of like, seriously, a lot of folks are in the space of like, what is the point? And why should I even try to carry on? Everything's going down the tube anyway. So why? It's big right now. And St. John's wort's one of the best. And for me, it's like the spirit of St. John's wort. It's like pouring liquid light down through the top of your head, and it's or top of your top up here. And it just fills your whole energy body with this golden liquid light. And so it just, you know, there's no room for shadow. There's no room for going down into the depths where there's no light. You can only be in light with St. John's wort. So I those are my favorites.
So many people could do with that, absolutely. But I
Yeah.
think as well, like working with plant spirits, you know, and having direct experience of the spirit realm really helps us to understand that we're connected so intimately to something far greater than ourselves. And that's what we need, you know, at a soul and a spirit level. We need that deep, deep connection. And so the plant spirits really help with that, you know, to help us on a spiritual level to heal, so that we're not so isolated, not so disconnected, and that we can understand how interconnected we are. And so sometimes, you know, I touch into the spirit realm and it just makes me cry, especially when, you know, you're being seen by a plant spirit. You know, it's like, wow, it's just, okay, I exist. You know, we've been negated so much throughout our lives in so many different ways, and then suddenly there's this spirit wanting to help us. It's profound, and it's really paradigm shifting. And so, yeah, I don't think I can emphasize enough how beautiful and transformational and soul nourishing working with plant spirits is. So on that lovely note, it is 8 o'clock, and being the Virgo that I am, I have kept good time, and I would like to see if anybody's got any questions for Pam or myself. if you do, I think there's a little like button that you can put your hand up, I believe.
I think you hit the reactions thing at the bottom, and
Oh,
that's where you can access the little hand. I
oh
think
yes, reactions.
reactions.
Someone knows how to use this. Yeah, anybody have any questions about anything? Okay, Saskia.
Hi, thank you so much for a deeply interesting and relevant and fascinating discussion. I'm very curious, Emma, you and I have talked about this a little bit, but I'm curious about Pam's opinion on not just our own spiritual evolution, but the plant spiritual evolution when we are in relationship and in conversation with the plants in this way. Could she speak a little bit about that, please?
Yeah, sure, absolutely. Yes, they are absolutely evolving as well. And so, I mean, there's okay, I'll try to, I'll try to bring it in. So what I have found is that they are definitely evolving, and because of our symbiotic relationship with plants, and that we have, we've kind of gone on the same track together for since day one, actually, as humans. We've always had the plant. We wouldn't have our life if it wasn't for the plants. We wouldn't breathe, we wouldn't eat, we wouldn't have tissue, all of that. So we're very symbiotically related, which means that because of this symbiotic relations, the plants are very, I mean, part of the gifts that they come in with are food and medicine. That's part of what they're doing here. And some people say to me, oh, I shouldn't be eating those plants. And I'm like, why not? That's part of their job. And so, so what I'm seeing is that the plants, some of them, I'm not going to say all of them, because there's a lot of plants out there and I don't know all of them, but the ones that I do know are like, so an example would be a plant that has a lot of vitamin C in it. And you read in all the old herbals that say, oh, do, dandelion or violet leaves or rose hips or whatever for scurvy. And you're like, scurvy, right. Okay, whatever. There's no scurvy. There probably is somewhere on the planet, not where you live and where I live. It doesn't exist anymore. So it's like, who cares? So what I'm saying to you is that you want to be paying attention to plants. You want to be asking for plants to help you with chemical sensitivities, with, exposure to EMFs. That's what's current, the chronic disease, Lyme disease, like, I'm talking on a physical level right now, but, we've got all the emotional and spiritual things as well. The grief is a big one, earth grief, because there's a serious amount of grief going down right now over the loss of what's happening on the planet right now, loss of species, deep, 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 deep grief. Stephen Buhner wrote a fabulous book called Earth Grief, which I recommend everybody reading. He's passed on now, but it's the last major work that he did. Anyway, so there's that level. And then there's the level of the reseeding the earth. And this is in all the prophecies, that the earth is being reseeded right now. So it's reseeded not only with, what do I want to say, different stories and paradigms and ways of thinking and feeling and being, not only that, but literally reseeding. So there's new plants coming from, I'm going to say the cosmos, and that have never been here before. And it's particularly to bring in this new story, new earth. There's a lot of people are calling it different kinds of things right now. I happen to have a student, she's a longtime student, and she's an artist, and she's really tuned in. She's like way sensitive, and she's been drawing the new plants that are coming in. So that's what I have to say about the evolution of the plants. They're absolutely evolving as well as we are. And there's new ones coming in for these times, because we are entering into a whole new ball game here. It's a whole new thing that we've not ever really seen before. And so so we need a whole new slew of plants to help us during this time. And they're coming. Some of them have already arrived. So
Thank you so much, Pam. If I may just ask for clarification, does that mean that we need to be in conversation and in relationship with them in order for them to evolve, or would they be doing that in any case?
oh no, they're going to do it anyway.
Okay, thank
They're
you.
gonna do it anyway. I mean, we are in this together.
And they do evolve, you know, by interaction with us, because we're unique. They get to evolve too through working with us, you know, through the co-creative process. So there is that aspect for sure,
Yeah.
as well as they are going to evolve anyway, because the earth is.
Yeah. You know, I used to say to myself, oh, the planet will be fine. Oh, it'll be fine. Okay. If we as a species, if our gig is up, it's like, okay, whatever. If, you know, we become one of the ones that doesn't make it, you know, one of the species that goes extinct. Oh, the earth will be fine. I've really changed my attitude towards that, because no, you know, we're here as a part of nature. That's the design. And the earth and nature needs us too. And because we are in it together, we are a part of this web. And what, you know, what I do affects what happens to the plants, and what, you know, and to the waters. And so my actions, what I think and do, has effect, and it affects the planet. And so, and vice versa. So I've really kind of done a backpedal on that one of like, no, there's not going to be fine without us. There's going to be a big void if we don't step it up right now and make a shift here on this planet. And it's a shift in consciousness, of course. That's what it is. It's about raising our consciousness to the level at which we stop destroying the planet. That's imperative right now, not tomorrow.
Absolutely.
And one of the ways we do that is working in co-creative partnership with the plants.